Okay folks, I am going to try to teach you a lesson about human stupidity. And if you don't come to my conclusion at the end of this, well then there's something wrong with you. We're going to eventually make our way to a recent video that was posted on Nikon Rumors. A link to a video where a guy does some testing about whether UV filters actually protect your lenses from destruction. Obviously they do protect them from dust and flying debris and bird crap, and so nobody's arguing that. But the main point here, and then we're going to work our way to a multi-billion-dollar company. And by the way, I used to be a god of tech support at Apple. However, I was #1 in the world. Now I'm still ranked #2, even though I haven't done it for many months on the MacBook Air. But I still knew why even a multi-billion-dollar company like Apple made a huge, colossal mistake. I mean, just a huge mistake. I don't know if it's because I'm a special. I mean, I may be a bald, tattooed freak, but I took a test back in high school, and it was a nonlinear reasoning test, and it turned out that I had the highest score ever recorded in the nation. And there were questions like, cat is to mouse as dog is to cat. What chases what? You had to draw the conclusion. So it was nonlinear thinking methodology. I'm always designing things in my head. I'm going to actually make them work in my head, which is why I desperately need to get a 3D printer. I got several inventions I need to prototype on a 3D printer, so I'm in the process of getting a 3D printer to print out some of my inventions, of which I've got about 12. But anyway, back to filters. The point is, before I get into the explanations of why these videos and why this multi-billion-dollar company are just flat out stupid, STOOOOOOPID, is that a lot of people draw the conclusions that just because something is done in a scientific manner, that therefore the conclusions are correct. I mean, as is the case, all of today's science is based upon the notion of quantum. The term quantum itself has absolutely no meaning whatsoever. Our current understanding of field theory is non-existent. Einstein was a moron. For the exact same reasons I say Einstein was a moron, for the exact same reasons Nikola Tesla said that Einstein was a moron. There's no such thing as warped space. Space is neither a force nor a field. It can act on nothing. Nikola Tesla said this sort of harebrained thinking from the quote-unquote fuzzy-haired crank. He was referring to Einstein when he called him a fuzzy-haired crank. He said it was doomed to oblivion, and of course he's right. Now, a lot of people actually the guy that made this video is well-meaning, maybe not super intelligent, but he's well-meaning. But he made a repeatable test. But you can see here he used a really thin rod, and he used some lenses that were attached to filters. He tested a lot of filters and filters attached to like dead lenses. But he used this really thin rod. Now the test is very repeatable, but the point is that I worked in several camera stores, okay? The real world actuality, and I made 2 videos about I used doorknob analogs cracking into filters. The lens was perfectly safe, but the filter was destroyed. It has to do with force dissipation impact, the strike force of whether it's either tempered glass or non-tempered glass, because he used a 1/4-inch metal rod, I believe, and of course this isn't tempered. I could tell by the shattering that this is tempered glass. But the point is that this does not represent, even though this test he does is repeatable exactly, that doesn't mean it's scientific, because it is not reflective of real-world impacts. And people actually damage their filters or their filters in their lenses. It's doorknobs or table corners and stuff. It's not really sharp objects like that. This is also why it's easier to break and shatter glass or tempered glass with the tip of a ballpoint pen, boom, crack, than it is with a blunt fist. Now, this is his analog. While it is scientifically repeatable, it is completely unrepresentative of real-world actuality. I'm going to make my way here to the multi-billion-dollar company and the huge, huge stupidity for which Apple had a lot of egg on their face, the iPhone 6 Plus. But let's continue on with this stupid analogy first. Now the guy's well-meaning, I got nothing against the guy at all, but he started out with a wrong premise. He created a repeatable experiment which does not represent real-world analog by using this very thin rod He also draws a conclusion in his video starting at 12 minutes and 53 seconds, which is completely specious. It's almost religious. It's absolutely nothing other than pure mental fabrication. It has nothing to do with the testing he did. But he concludes a lot of things which are not indicative of how lenses and filters are destroyed. And people are not running into perfectly blunt, pointy objects like this at perfectly 90-degree attack angles. Most of them are glancing blows, and most of them are doorknobs, table corners. And that's how the vast majority of filters and or filter lenses, i.e. the front elements, are damaged. So his test is completely, while repeatable, is completely wrong because he started out with a wrong premise. But a lot of people, meaning stupid people, that watch videos like this, well, the guy made a test, and he tested a lot of lenses and a lot of filters, and so, his conclusions have to be, well, no, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. I mean, you're talking about, like, the particle collider in Europe. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars spent, and they start out with a completely specious conclusion before they actually build the experiment, and then their specious conclusions are actually superimposed on the results that are found. And one can start out with a specious conclusion, create this obnoxious experiment which has nothing to do with real world impacts of filters and or filters on lenses. Now let's make our way to the stupidity of Apple. Now, when this iPhone 6 first came out, every Apple device that comes out, I always look at the teardown. I've always, since I was very young, took stuff apart, and I could always see design flaws. Like when Glock came out with a new handgun and they changed the recoil spring, the first second I put my hand on the gun, it's like there are going to be enormous numbers of recalls on this, and I was 100% accurate. This multi-billion-dollar company, which Glock Incorporated is, and they make Glock handguns, they had to do a recall of these recoil springs. I mean, it took me 5 seconds to determine what, endless PhD engineers working for Glock can figure out. Now, Apple obviously has endless Poindexter arseholes working for them. But if you actually see right here on the image, this is the iPhone 6 Plus. Each one of these holes over here on the side, okay, it has a strut reinforcement bar. So every hole in a piece of aluminum obviously is a weak point. So they actually bridge that weak point with a strut bar, a reinforcement strut bar. But what Apple didn't do is, and before I tell you what they didn't do, this is their testing methodology. Single point, just like this guy's test. Completely invalid. Okay, this video is important. You'll really learn something if you just hold on for a few more minutes, okay? This is Apple's testing method. This thing would poke the iPhone 6 Plus, which, by the way, is Apple's largest iPhone. I have a 6, this is a 6 Plus, which is larger. This thing would constantly poke it and test for stress fractures or bending. And here's the same test looking side on. A single point, boom, boom, boom. You sit there and pound on it day in and day out. And of course it came out fine. And from that testing, which is completely invalid, by the way, just like this guy's testing is totally invalid, doesn't represent the real world. When I looked at this before Bendgate hit the fan, before the crap hit the fan, I saw this because as soon as a phone hits the market, there are these places that tear it down and show you pictures inside. I knew that the phone would be a failure. It had a design flaw. Why? Because I saw these, and I knew the single point testing on this phone would not hold up to real world use. A lot of people stick these phones in the back of their pockets, in the front of their pockets, and what they're doing is they're actually applying force dissipation over a large area instead of a small area like Apple's testing here. Single point, small area. Completely inverse to this. This is small area, not real world testing, okay? Same thing here, different design flaw. Oh, this isn't a design flaw, this is an invalid test. But the issue that Apple could have mitigated this by without a serious design change is that each one of these strut bars should have been reinforced like they are now, but with a bridging strut bar that went all the way across to all the holes on the side of the phone. See, if they'd stuck a single strut bar that bridged all of these, Then the bend gate of the iPhone 6 Plus. Remember all those little kids were going into Apple stores and sitting there and they're like, they're bending the phone even with their tiny little kitty hands? It's a design flaw. But the design flaw was based upon very scientific testing. They did endless boom, 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 boom with this device, and here's the same device, different angle, boom, boom, boom. But this is not indicative of real-world testing. Major fail. Okay, Apple employs God knows how many thousands of engineers and assholes with slide rulers, and forgive me for saying this, but highly analytical Asians, okay? People that make most Americans look stupid, and Europeans look stupid because they have slide rulers jammed up their crack. And that's not a racist remark. I'm actually calling Asians smart, for God's sakes, okay? So don't give me any crap over that. But it's myopia. These people, they have no capacity for not talking about Asians, I'm talking about all people. People have no capacity for nonlinear thought, that they're actually able to abduct the nature of how something it works with a real-world testing. So when I first saw this, I knew it'd be a design flaw. But why would a pathetic tattooed freak like me know that this would be a design flaw? All I had to do is look at it. It's like, this is an issue. There isn't a reinforcement strut bar between all these holes. Oh, well, this is Apple's real-world testing, highly scientific test. This is testing device costs more than your house does. So it has to be. This is the same thing they concluded from this guy's filter test. It was a garage test. But like, well, it's scientific and it's repeatable. It's still invalid. It's still invalid. Just as this is invalid, because teenage girls and people with tight jeans, they stick this in their pocket, they sit down or they walk, okay? And instead of single point pressure, what you do is you have dissipated pressure over a larger area, which makes this sort of testing invalid. Which means that the non-reinforcing bar, which does not exist between all of these holes in the side of the iPhone, even though each hole or pair of holes has a reinforcing strut bar, there is not a single bridge between those bars. So, you get where I'm going? You get where I'm going? Just because something is scientific and it's done by a multi-billion-dollar company doesn't mean they have any sense. It's sort of myopic hubris, the notion that something is scientific because it's done on $1 million testing device, although this guy's was done in his garage, but it was still a repeatable test. But the repeatable test he did was invalid. And I don't fault him for that. He just wasn't thinking ahead. Most people don't. I mean, he had no ill will or intention, so it's no fault of the guy that did this video. But I do fault someone like Apple that has thousands of engineers and billions of dollars to get the test right. Am I wrong on that? Am I wrong? No, I'm not wrong. I'm 100% correct. Because of a fat tattooed loser freak like me, which I'm not a loser, I am a bit of a freak, but I'm a lot smarter than most people, if I can spot a design flaw in something where a multi-billion-dollar company cannot, then there's something wrong with the world. Because I do not have an engineering degree. You know why? You know why something's important? Because all the degrees in the world, okay, don't amount to more than papers. Papers are for dogs. Either you have a natural ability to decipher whether something is correct or incorrect, wise or unwise, logical or illogical, or you don't. 5-year, 6-year, 7-year, 8-year degrees in college can never give that to you. You can read all the books in the world, but unless you have a natural intuitive ability to grasp and see things and how things work, then engineering degree really doesn't amount to much. It amounts to something, but it doesn't amount to anything ultimately. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something.